Guys, here at Shield Canine, we are live. Sorry, I'm 2 minutes late. I was slightly distracted by something. Anyways, um, let's get to the topic at hand. We are going to be talking about the e-collar and how I use it in training. I'll just make sure that people can hear me and see me. You never know with these YouTube lives. Sometimes they're a little glitchy. And once I'm sure that we have good sound, good audio, and that people are here, I'll get started on the topic at hand. So just drop a hey, how are you in the chat? Just drop a hey, how are you in the chat, and we'll go. Hello, hello, hello. Well, all right, looks like we're good to go. All right, guys. So here is what it is. The topic of conversation, obviously, today is going to be all of the consternation that my last video on using the e-collar caused. Apparently, it caused a whole bunch of people getting upset, people getting confused, people asking questions. And these are the best forms of content. When people are upset, when people are confused, when people have questions, these are the best forms of content because this is what stimulates conversation. And conversation needs to happen. And everybody has their own way of stimulating conversation and talking about things, whether it's the e-collar or anything else. And my way is kind of in your face. I'm going to take it and I'm going to shove it in your face. And if you don't like it, oh well, too bad, so sad. So I deliberately, kind of say things and do things when I make those videos because I'm a little bit of a troll at heart, I guess, right? So I like trolling people a little bit. And I know it's going to get all the, crazy people with the blue hair all worked up and upset. And they're going to have to double their medications and, all the various things, right? And here's fundamentally the problem that most people have with an e-collar is they view it as a bad thing. This is because you were bad. This is because you didn't listen. This is a tool of last resort. I mean, I can't say it like people are so stupid with this device, right? Because for them, it's only that. It's only that. And they limit it. They limit themselves. It's kind of like just saying, I use hammer, like you have a hammer, let's say, I use hammer to break things. That's all I do. If you have hammer, hammer bad because hammer break things. It's like, yeah, you can break something with a hammer or you can build something with a hammer. And the e-collar is that, right? Except it's much more than that because I can actually reach out at great distances and I can touch the dog and I can touch the dog in different places and I can touch the dog with different levels of intensity and different types of stimulation. We have continuous stim, we have nick, right? They both yield different, completely different responses from the dog. And these things that I'm telling you when it comes to the e-collar, guys, like you'll have different camps, right? You'll have the typical pet dog trainer, big name pet dog trainer on YouTube, whatever. This is I'm communicating with him and blah, 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 blah. And the dog's wearing a pinch collar and an e-collar and walking next to him in a functional heel and, doing just pedestrian kind of obedience work. And, it's kind of like, hey, look, you can make your pet dog behave. And it's like, yeah, no, that's true. You can. Then you've got the guys on YouTube talking about like, just low stim, low stim, low stim. It's all about the low stim, oh, look, he barely feels it, blah, 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 blah. And you got those guys. And then you got other guys where it's like, it's a tool of last resort. I only use it when everything else has failed, when everything else has been exhausted, I use it. It's like people just put the e-collar into a box when in fact it can be in many boxes. In fact, it should be in many boxes. The e-collar, guys, you can take this right now to the bank. If you don't know how to use a fucking e-collar, you are missing a huge tool in your toolbox as a dog trainer. If you are a dog trainer, right? Now, should you be able to train a dog without an e-collar? Yes. If you can train a dog without an e-collar and you can train a dog with an e-collar and you have the choice between the two, you will always pick with the e-collar, right? You can take that to your bank, right? And now you'll get some people, I trained with e-collars for many years and now, I learned a better way and I don't use the e-collar anymore. And it's like, yeah, so basically you tell me you sucked with the e-collar, you just broke a bunch of shit with it, right? I broke a lot of things with the hammer for 20 years. But now, I don't use the hammer anymore. I just stack things on top of each other and hope they stay together, right? It's essentially the equivalent of what you're telling me, right? So there's sucking at something for long periods of time does not negate the effectiveness of the thing, right? The e-collar has been used obviously in the beginning because it was much more of a crude tool in a crude way. But now the e-collar is significantly more advanced. It's 2025. The e-collar has so many different possibilities and applications because of the advances in technology, right? And because you're able to graduate the stim and change the frequency of the stim, just like how we talked about. So, rethinking the e-collar. Now, how should you think about the e-collar? Let's talk about that. We've talked about the problem. Let's talk about how should you think about the e-collar. You should think about the e-collar the same way you think about your hand, right? And again, I'm assuming you're kind of like a balanced, holistic, natural dog trainer. And I'm not saying that in the kooky sense of, you're trying to alpha roll the dog and fucking bark at him and do all this dumb shit, right? I'm talking about like, you understand that the dog is a creature of nature, that he exists beyond our utopian ideologies, and he just exists in the real, and he only responds to what is real, and he doesn't respond to, cool stories and fake ideas, right? Which is why you see, the obese lady with the multicolored hair with her dog in a halty for 5+ years struggling with basic reactivity that could be resolved in 10 minutes, right? She's trying to exist in a utopian ideology. The dog is like, bro, I live here in the real world. I can't be with you and all your SSRIs and all the crazy shit that you're in. Like I'm here in the real world and like that's what I respond to. And the stuff you're doing, it doesn't work for me because it's not real. Right? And that's the fantastic thing about dogs. So e-collar training with your hand, whatever, this is natural, right? It's natural because it's real. It's real. You can do things with it. You can do things with it, right? The hand can be a tool to comfort. The hand can be a tool to excite. Come on, come on, come on, come on, come on, come on. And the hand can be a tool to correct, right? The hand can be a lot of things. Do we just say, oh, because I can hit something with my hand is only a bad thing? Do we say, because I can give food or toy or praise or, positive reinforcement with my hand, is my hand only a good thing? No. My hand is everything. My hands are everything. I use them all the time for every purpose. So people say, well, if you correct your dog with your hands, right? Let's use what let's talk about the actually, you know what? I'm getting ahead of myself. If you correct your dog with the e-collar, how can you then reinforce your dog, encourage your dog, reward your dog with the e-collar? And I counter that by saying, if you correct your dog with your hand, how can you then reward, reinforce, and comfort your dog with the same hand you used to correct him? Right? This is the thing people don't understand. And in some ways, people overestimate the intelligence of a dog, and in other ways, they underestimate the intelligence of a dog. By the way, guys, I'm going to pause this right now and say, in the description below, I have not yet included, and I can't because, quite frankly, I'm talking to you guys right now. At the end of this live, I will put the link to a webinar that I'm going to be doing this Wednesday, the 25th of September at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, where I will be discussing how to properly use the e-collar, how I use the e-collar in my full power training system, right? This is specifically geared towards performance dogs, performance work, right? So this is going to be a webinar in which we are going to go over my personal system for how I introduce the e-collar how I recondition the e-collar, let's say if with a dog that maybe had like a different experience with the e-collar, or how I introduce a dog that has never had the e-collar to the e-collar, and then how I use it moving forward. So I'm going to spill the beans because people always are like, well, your dog, for instance, you'll see my dog in a perfect heel and I'll hit him with the e-collar. And people are like, why did you do that? Why did you do that? He was doing it perfectly, right? Like there was no reason to do that. There's no reason to do that because for you, the e-collar is a bad thing and he was being good. So why would you do a bad thing when he's being good? What if it's not a bad thing to him? What if in that context, it's not a bad thing to him, right? I want you to think about the e-collar like that. So, and the reason why I show these videos of the dog next to me, just giving everything he's got, right? The whole freaking time, tail wagging, head up, ears up, and you can see the dog is literally the definition. If I said full power and you saw that dog with me, and you guys have seen the trial footage, you've seen what the dog does, and I'm talking both my dogs, Chico and Gage. You've seen what both those dogs have done. In 2024, you saw what I did with my dog Gage, who overperformed beyond his genetic capability, right? Top 10 in the world, finished in the top 10 in the world, right? Now you see what I did with my dog Chico, Ontario regional champion, what's it called? Canadian national champion. He's on the world team. He's going to be at the WSV in 2 weeks. It's not an accident. It's two different dogs, two very different dogs, right? But the same fundamental principles apply to both of them, right? And using the e-collar to enhance and optimize the training, to sharpen the dog, to prep the dog, right? To fix the dog when the dog is wrong, right? So I want you also to think about this. Both those dogs have had good trials and bad trials. But the really important thing to understand when you look at the track record of those dogs, okay, is that when they had a bad trial, the next trial was always a good trial, right? The next trial was always a good trial. So it tells you that we can fix problems, right? With a lot of competition dogs, what you'll see, and why we speak a lot about competition is because competition is optimized performance. We're not talking about your pet dog walking down the street. I mean, not that that's not important. It is. And ironically, both Chico and Gage will walk next to me off leash down the street. And they won't walk next to me off leash down the street like it's a competition. And guess what? I use the e-collar for that too, right? So I use the e-collar to keep the dog in functional pet obedience. I use the e-collar to drive the arousal, intensity, focus, and power of the dog to the maximum in competition. I use the e-collar for aggression. I use the e-collar to stop aggression. I use the e-collar to build drive. I use the e-collar to cap drive. How is this possible? Because the e-collar is like my hands. And just like my hands, if I change the context of how I use it and what it means to the dog, he responds appropriately. Now, this isn't like just easy crap like you've never used an e-collar before. So now that you've heard me say this on this YouTube live, you're going to go do it. Don't do that shit. You're going to get hurt. Or the dog's just going to, it's going to fall apart, right? We're talking about some stuff that it's ginger ale, folks, in case you were wondering. Anyways, we're talking about very advanced stuff, but not complicated. That's the thing. It's advanced, but it's not complicated. And I'll tell you this, in my dog training journey, there have been many instances in which I heard a piece of information or I saw something done, but I was not yet at the level that I could actually properly understand and appreciate what I was seeing. But when I reached that level, all of a sudden, the memory of what I experienced made sense to me. I was like, oh, that's what that guy was doing. That makes a lot more sense, right? And what I want to do now is I want to create something here with the webinar that I'm going to do. By the way, I posted it on Facebook, so if you want to join the webinar, you just go on the Shield Canine Facebook page. You can join it. I'll post it on the Instagram story after this, and I'll post it in the YouTube description after this. Anyways, long story short, I want to create this webinar where I literally go through step by step how to use it, and whether you're able to use it immediately or you're going to use that knowledge 6 months, 2 years, 5 years down the line, you're going to be like, that's what Haz was talking about. Or maybe you're right there right now where you're like, you know what, this makes a lot of freaking sense. I'm going to use it like that. Now, I am not going to sit in front of you guys and pretend. Guys, so someone just tried to call me. Obviously, I'm on my phone. Let me know. Let me know if we've lost audio. If we've lost audio, then I'll restart. All right, we're good. All right, okay, all right. I hate when people try to call me on my phone when I'm talking. Anyways. Where was I? Yes. So, when it comes to using the e-collar, right? When it comes to using the e-collar, I'm not going to sit in front of you and pretend that everything that I'm doing with the e-collar is brand spanking new. Now, I know some trainers will do that. They'll be like, this is like the newest, most secretest, magical shit that anyone's ever come up with. It's not, right? I've seen other trainers use variations of what I do, right? I use a mix of a lot of different systems, right? I've obviously taken information from multiple other sources, multiple other training systems and trainers and ideologies, and I've twisted it and changed it and adapted it to what I do and how I like to do things. So I'm going to make that clear right now, because I know some trainers do that, right? Where they kind of pretend like what they're doing is like just this magical stuff that like no one's ever come up with before, and they're just repackaging the same shit over again, right? I'm not you're probably not going to hear it and see it the way that I do it the exact same as anybody else, because it's not. But I'm not saying everything that I'm doing is completely original, because it's not, right? But again, I've taken it and I've adapted it. Well, the problem with a lot of systems that I see, right? We're going to talk again about results. I am Mr. Motherfucking Results. That is the world that I exist in. I don't care about maybe. I don't care about cool stories. I don't care about how I feel. I just care about results. Results on the field are what speak to me, right? And that is the work that is where I operate, okay? And I have the benefit and the privilege of competing at a high level repeatedly over and over again with multiple dogs. And when you do that, you're able, and I also have clients that I coach, so on and so forth. You're able to see the feedback in real time, right? In the actual competition with variety, different type of dog. Oh, this works very well. This doesn't. Oh, for this dog, this works. For that dog, that works, right? That is the benefit of competition. You guys may or may not know that I like trolling in the comments sometimes, and I will troll in the comments. Sometimes I'm not going to pretend it's always a strategic thing. Sometimes it is. The more wood on the fire, the more smoke and flame, so to speak. But in some cases, it's just me, just chilling out on the couch and having a good time, right? So it's a bit of what's the word? It's a vice that I have, that sometimes I like to be a little trolly in the comments. But anyways, this silly woman, as there are many in my comments, and there's also silly men as well. No, don't go there. Anyways, goes on to go, well, what happens when the e-collar comes off? And of course, I glibly replied, we win championships. Because that's pretty much the only time the e-collar comes off. The e-collar comes off when I go on the trial field, right? And boom, right? There it is. There's the results in 4K. You guys can see it, right? I say we win championships, right? Because that, again, people are like, oh, your ego, blah, 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 blah. No, it's not an ego thing, right? It's more a question of what works versus what doesn't work. If you've ever competed at a high level, right? If you've ever completed at a high level, the level at which your dog has to have a reliability, an understanding of a behavior, a commitment to that behavior, and how good your dog has to feel about performing that behavior is at a level that most people will never understand, because they never have pushed to that place. It's kind of like watching you know, like watching, I don't know, an elite power lifter or something, and he's like going to this place, and you're like, criticizing his form or whatever. And it's like, bro, you don't know what it took for him to lift that 800 pounds because you've never pushed yourself to that place. And competing at a high level with your dog is that fundamentally, right? Sorry, guys, I am not reading the comments. Is this dumb motherfucker really talking about World War II? Why did we not use them in World War II? I don't know. Did we not have like penicillin in World War II? Like, there's a lot of things we didn't have in World War II that we would have used if we could have used them, you know? I'm sorry, guys. I'm being crass because I don't have a lot of patience today for idiocy. Sometimes I'm like a man, I'm just a complete man of God, I'm a saint, all the idiocy just rolls right off of me, but today, not so much. Anyways, let's see here. Jess says, do you think the techniques you use and general e-collar usage is appropriate for people who just want companion dogs and not dogs for competition-specific tasks? Look, can you get by? So remember what I said, there's various levels of e-collar training, right? There's basic, don't go in the garbage, don't chase the sheep e-collar training, right? Very simple, very crude, doesn't need to be complicated. Then there's the next level, come when you're called e-collar training, right? And then the next level, let's say a fully functionally obedient dog, right? And then we start getting into much more advanced stuff when we start talking about optimized performance in terms of competition dog sport, right? That is a completely different level because now we need the e-collar not just to keep the dog correct. We need the e-collar to keep the dog correct. We can't lose the expressiveness of the dog. We can't lose the speed of the dog. We can't lose the confidence of the dog. We need the dog to look happy. We need the dog to be fast. We need the dog to be more correct. We need the dog to not do some things and to do other things more, right? This is a very different way to use the e-collar. So if you're a regular pet person and you're asking me, should I take your webinar? My answer to you would be this. If you're happy with where you're at with the e-collar right now and you have no time or desire or interest in learning more about it and all the potential capacity that it has, no, be happy with what you've got, stick with it. And quite frankly, like with my Elite Off-Leash Obedience course, in my online courses, that's designed for functional obedience for pet dogs, right? If that's where you're at and you're happy with the results and you don't really care to know much more about the e-collar, it's fine. Is this stuff that you would necessarily be doing with your companion dog? No, not really. Not really, because this is much more of an advanced way. Now, we can talk about companion dog training because, again, all my sport dogs also have the companion training with the e-collar. So I do the sport stuff with the e-collar. I do the companion training with the e-collar. And I'll also even correct them, just like a crude correction with the e-collar if that's, necessary. Dave, I want you to shut the fuck up or I'm going to ban you. You're one of those idiots that just likes to babble on, without adding any value to the conversation, just saying one inane thing you read on the internet after another. So I'm going to allow you to exercise your ability to shut the fuck up. And if you don't, I'm just going to ban you right now. I'm going to do a webinar on shutting the fuck up. That's a webinar that we need in this world because there's way too many people that run their mouths on the internet. It's always on the internet, right? That just don't know how to shut the fuck up about things they don't know, right? You will never see me on some, I don't know, there's a lot of things I don't know anything about. Some car mechanic YouTube live babbling about 1945 cars and trying to talk about, yeah, I will. I know you need it here. There, you don't exist anymore. Anyways, you'll never see me on some channel talking about some stuff I don't know about and arguing with somebody who's clearly a subject matter expert. I have better things to do with my time. Anyways. No, Dave doesn't need an e-collar. He doesn't need something as advanced as an e-collar. What people like Dave need is old-fashioned training, the same type that we did in 1945, like the training that he was going on about in World War II. That's what he needs. Yeah, he got banded. Exactly. All right. Anyways, back to the topic at hand, folks. Okay. So this webinar, yes, the webinar is geared more towards dog sport, in the sense of using the collar at that highest level. Not the highest level in terms of the actual. We'll talk about levels with the e-collar because, again, that caused a lot of consternation. Because I train Chico habitually. He is at the maximum on the 1900 NCP double box Dogtra, right? And hey, he's at the maximum. And you guys saw the reaction that he gave me on the maximum, right? Now, there's a reason he's at the maximum, right? There's a reason he's at the maximum. But like I said, a lot of people don't understand the e-collar. For them, it's always bad. It's never good. But for Chico, it's good sometimes. It's bad sometimes. It totally depends on the context. What else do we got? Can I still correct him with the double box? It depends what you mean by correct. So when most people speak about correcting a dog, they mean the dog isn't doing something the right way. And when I apply the stimuli, he fixes his behavior. So let's say I told him to down, he didn't down, and I corrected him and he downed, right? Yes, I certainly can do that. So let's say he decided to, I don't know, chase a bunny, right? And I called him, he didn't come. I could definitely hit him and he's going to turn around and come, right? Could I use it with him to stop him from fighting with another dog? No. No, I couldn't, right? But there's also a lot of dogs that you can't do that with regardless of their foundation in the e-collar. That's why I always laugh when people say, when they see me training a dog that has resource guarding, or they see us training a dog that has aggression and all of these things, and the dog is wearing an e-collar, and they say, you just lit him up with the e-collar. It's like, are you crazy? Lighting him up with the e-collar is going to get everybody hurt, right? Because even with a dog that doesn't have the foundation work in the e-collar that I've put into my dogs, which we are going to go over in the webinar, and I guess we can talk a little bit about the effect of the e-collar on behavior modification in the webinar. I'm not going to make that too much of a long topic because I don't want people to be confused about that. And again, this is talking about optimized performance, but maybe I should discuss it because it is something that people have a fair bit of interest in. And there's still this kind of like belief out there that you can like shock a dog out of being aggressive. And sometimes it's true and sometimes it's not. When is the webinar? The webinar is going to be this coming Wednesday, the 25th at 7 p.m. How am I clarifying plus P? So typically, you're asking about positive punishment. So this person's kind of using more canine trouble dog training says, with Chico at 127, I'd assume you're typically using negative reinforcement. So how are you clarifying positive punishment to him? I hate to tell you guys, but the vast majority of dogs using the e-collar as a positive punisher is generally not a good idea, right? With a lot of dogs, especially working dogs, right? Because working dogs are wired a little bit differently. And working dogs, I'm not just talking about herders, you know, you can look at the terrier group as well when it comes to that, especially when they're in a heightened state of arousal. And you then, and think about it, arousal is usually present with most behavior that people are looking to positively punish, right? There's usually a significant component of arousal involved in all those behaviors. So now you're going to dump a whole bunch of pain stimulation on top of that arousal. That's why the e-collar generally doesn't work for that stuff, and I do not recommend it, right? Because you're more likely going to get hurt. You're gonna hurt something, right? You're either going to get hurt yourself, the dog's going to hurt someone, you know, you're going to change how the dog views the e-collar, all of this type of stuff. So I'm not a big fan, actually, of the e-collar as a positive punisher. Will there be any information that isn't included in the sport bundle? Yes, there'll be a lot of information that isn't included in the sport bundle because I made the sport bundle Many of the components of the sport bundle were made, a couple of years ago, and my training is constantly changing, right? Now, the fundamental principles, the good thing about like the online courses, so he's referring to my sport bundle where I talk about where I have courses on focus healing, positions, dumbbell retrieves, all of that stuff, secret sauce, all of that. When you understand these things, this webinar is actually going to bring a lot of that stuff into even sharper understanding. It's going to expand upon that foundation, right? If you're one of these people that like my dog doesn't sit when I tell him to sit, this webinar isn't for you. You need like a basic how-to course, right? This webinar is going to be talking, like I said, about the fundamental system for using the e-collar in order to optimize performance, behavior, how to finish a competition dog, all of that stuff. Yeah. So, yeah. So, guys, if you want, again, to sign up for the webinar, it is on the Shield Canine Facebook page right now. I just did a post, and again, I'll put in the description and the Instagram story. Anyways, we're gonna continue to talk here. I'm just going through some of these comments because, like I said, I missed a bunch of them. Zen says, can't believe there are people out there still ignorant to the opportunities of good e-collar training. It's a game changer. It's modern technology. The fundamental people don't understand, the fundamental principles of dog training, right? Don't change whether or not you're using an e-collar. All the e-collar does is it literally it can enhance and optimize and magnify what you're doing, or it can magnify the bad shit that you're doing and make it even worse, right? Um, so Alexis says, I'll be definitely tuning in to the webinar since I've been scanning all your videos trying to figure out your technique for the e-collar. Yeah, no, it'll be very informative. With my regular courses, so my regular online courses, I always show the e-collar work, but I also understood that some people wouldn't want to use the e-collar, so I tried to show also how it would be done without the e-collar, because believe it or not, I do know how to do it without the e-collar. And so I didn't make the courses completely dependent on the e-collar because I know there's people in certain places, they won't want to use the e-collar that much, if at all. Like if you're in Europe in certain places, you have to be very careful how you use the e-collar. You have to be very selective in how you use the e-collar. Again, it always cracks me up. I don't know why. There's a lot of Europeans on my Facebook business page. I guess they see the posts and they're always going, these tools are banned in our country. And it's like, yeah, you dummy. You know how many people in your country, including the top trainers that you probably worship, use them, right? But they have to use them in secret because it's obviously a crime, a terrible crime. But you wouldn't believe, the big names, and I will never say the names, but the big names that you probably all know that are in those places and using those devices, right? And they have to because they want to compete and they want to be at that top level and they know that they need it, especially when you have a certain type of dog. And this is the other thing I want to come back to with the e-collar, right? This idea, and I should probably do a webinar on e-collar training the fearful dog. That's going to be a different webinar. But I tell you, every fear case I get, every anxiety case I get, that is e-collar training. E-collar training immediately for these dogs because the e-collar operates in the most natural plane of understanding and perception that a dog has, right? It operates on touch, right? Dogs are creatures of nonverbal communication, and a big component of nonverbal communication is physical contact, right? And with the fearful dogs, they are very much in the world of touch. Touch is the best way to get control of their mind. And when you can control the mind, you can control the emotion over time, right? And you can give them coping strategies. Luciano says, hi, Haz, could you please talk about how the e-collar can be used in decoy confrontation training during the protection phase. I will talk about that in the ecollar seminar. I will talk about, or the webinar, I will talk about how you can use the e-collar to increase the intensity. Listen, the e-collar can be used to increase the intensity of a dog doing anything, right? Whether it's tracking, obedience, or protection. So we will be talking about that when it comes to everything. um, is there any value in teaching your dog a paw or shake command? I mean, if you find it exciting, it's something that pleases you, by all means, do it. Does it help the dog mentally in any capacity? No. No. It's just one of those cute things that we all like to do. Logan says there is a good study on e-collar use on aggression, particularly learned aggression, Tortura 1983 for anyone who's interested. Yeah, that's an example of that is an example of just using electric shock. I don't even think they varied the level of the electric shock on the animals. And that's an example of that. So would I equate that to you can learn something from that study, certainly. And fundamentally, I'm going to summarize that study. If it's the same study that I think you're talking about, what they determined is they could stimulate, I believe it was rats or pigeons. I can't remember which one. But fundamentally, they would put two of them, I think, together. This is in the 1980s, bear in mind, right? And they would shock one of them until it became agitated enough to fight with the other one, and then they would also use the shock to stop them from fighting. And what they found is you could use the electric shock to stimulate the aggression, and you could use the electric shock to stop the aggression, right? And it's very true that you can. Yeah. But there's something to be learned there, but again, take it all with a grain of salt, because that's very what's the word? Crude. It's a very crude thing that we're talking about. Sequoia says, hi from the Netherlands. Yes, they are banned. If you get caught, it costs you 265 euros and your collar is gone. Yeah, many folks in the Netherlands are using them still. And in Germany, I think it's even like a jail. It's a jail. But I think, what is it? Martin System sells more collars to Germany, I think, than like anywhere else in the world. And believe me, guys, I'm going to tell you this right now: the Germans, the people in the Netherlands, the people all over Western Europe, Sweden, all of these people, Finland, they are all using the e-collar, right? If they're top level trainers that are actually something, not the blue haired lunatic talking on Facebook, right? They're all using it, and of course they cannot admit it because it's a crime. So we must accept that they can't admit it. But today I had my first experience with someone coming up to me in an empty field telling me I need to have my dog on leash. How do you handle the situation when you know your dog is reliably trained? Well, number one, I mean, it would depend on the context. Is it like, if it's a private field and the field belongs to that individual, then of course, you leash up the dog and you don't argue because it's not your property, and you respect the wishes of whoever's property you're on. That being said, if it's a public place, um, if it's a public place, um, I'm trying to figure out how to put this politely. I'm going to go tell him to go fuck himself. That's probably what I would do, right? Um, on the webinar, will I talk about something included in my book? No, I will not talk about anything included in my book, because my book was designed for basic functional training for the pet dog and basic behavior modification for the pet dog. This is advanced, optimized performance training with the e-collar. This is much more. This is much more. This is another level. Justin says, my female shepherd gets way too excited aroused over everything. Every other dog I've had straightens the F up with these hands. He put these hands in quotes, but she is completely unfazed. What do I do? Well, when you are trying to apply a positive punisher to a dog that, let's say, has, and I'll use Chico as an example, has an extremely hard nervous system, especially when it comes to handler pressure, especially when it comes to physical pressure, right? They have a very thick threshold. There's a lot of dogs, very thin threshold. You're just like, hey, don't do that. Ooh, okay, won't do it, right? And even you give them a little tap and they're like, okay, I'll never do it again. And it's not because it hurts, it's because they have a very thin threshold. Even the weakest dogs tend to be actually physically very tough, and they're not physically that sensitive, but mentally they're very sensitive. But you'll have some dogs, and usually it's in the working dogs, where they're always in this like kind of heightened state of arousal. They're always walking around at like this high state of arousal, and they're always just looking for the next thing to overstimulate on. And for those dogs, when you try, your typical methods of correction, what you'll find is that the dog just simply becomes more agitated, and you're just actually negatively reinforcing the agitated, aroused behavior, instead of kind of suppressing the dog back down to a place where their brain can start to function and they can start to behave themselves. And in those cases, it's almost always an intensity issue, right? Remember that study we referenced with the rats, okay? You can use the electric, or the rats, it was pigeons, rats, something, right? You can use the electricity to stimulate aggression, and you can use the electricity to stop aggression. And no, I'm not telling you to shock your dog out of aggression or whatever. I'm making a point in terms of like the general rules of how dogs learn, think, and communicate. Let's see here. Would I apply positive punishment to a 4-year-old dog that recently started marking in the house? Um, it's frustration. The dog will pee outside, then 10 minutes later mark in the house. Yeah, it's certainly something that can crop up. Yeah, I would definitely apply positive punishment to that. The key is you have to catch the dog in the moment, and then you have to make a big deal out of it so he understands and pairs the experience of the positive punishment with the undesired behavior, right? Doggy Brigade says chameleon versus Dogtra 1900. How come you choose to use Dogtra? I don't like chameleons at all. And I have nothing against Bart Balon. I think, like, obviously he's a pioneer in the industry and so on and so forth. Every time I've had a client with a chameleon, I've just never liked them. I don't like how complex they are. I don't like things that are too complex, because I need to be fast. There's always too much fucking around with the thing, right? Like, I like to be, and a lot of the time the high isn't high enough. I like a Dogtra. They're more than complex enough for any of the tasks that I want to accomplish, such as winning championships. I just don't feel the need to go to the chameleon. I would use a chameleon probably like if I lived in Europe and I had to like hide my e-collar all the time. But thank God I don't have to do that, right? Yeah, I mean, if your dog refuses to bark on command, you need to be able to install the ability. I mean, if it's super important to you, well, you probably have a motivation problem. Like, if your dog barked and got something for barking, then why would they all of a sudden stop barking? Right? And typically, when you want your dog to bark at you, it's kind of like a happy, fun command, right? It's kind of like playing dead or whatever else, right? So, if you want the dog to bark at you and they don't bark, I mean, you've just clearly stopped reinforcing the barking in such a way that the dog would find that behavior desirable. If you wanted to make it reliable, you must layer in some form of negative reinforcement to the barking. So for me, with my dogs, if they didn't bark, well, I've layered in various types of negative reinforcement. I could nick them on the collar and tell them to bark, and they would for sure bark. or I could even poke them or like anything, right? And they would bark because they have that what's the word that classical conditioning has occurred, right? Logan says, I know the study you're thinking of has, but Tortura 1983 was on dogs. Oh, it was on dogs. Okay. Curing aggression through contingent punishment and signaling. Absolutely. I will say this. If you get a dog that has never experienced an e-collar before, and that dog is aggressive or likes to chase cars or whatever, and you say, listen, I'm not doing any conditioning, nothing. I'm just going to put this on the dog, and anytime he does that bad thing, I'm going to say no, and I'm going to punish him on the e-collar on a high level and just give him a really bad experience. And you decide that that's going to be the way you do it. With a lot of dogs, I would say with about 70% of dogs, you'll be successful. With about 70% of dogs. There's about 30% of them out there that if you do that, you're going to make it worse. Either you're going to get bit, the other person's going to get bit, but you're definitely going to go down a bad road with that. So you have to be aware of all the potential side effects. How would I bring an overstimulated dog back down to earth? Well, first of all, I give them a job, right? So with overstimulated dogs, they're always looking for something to stimulate themselves with, right? Like where's that dog that I'm going to bark at? Where's that person that I'm going to jump on? It's like it's always they're always just looking for their next fix, like a crackhead. So what I do with those dogs actually is I give them a job, right? A very simple job in the beginning, like, hey, can't pull me on the leash. And then I make that job progressively more difficult and I escalate the consequences for failing at that job, such that the dog is not able to multitask, aka be hyper aroused, looking for their next thing to be aroused towards. Instead, they have to completely focus on the task that I've given them, aka not pulling on the leash. Um, Once I have that, and the dog has a basic understanding, I'm going to make that task, like I said, progressively more difficult, where I'll do a lot of direction changes, walk really fast, walk really slow, stop suddenly, all these things that are designed to make the dog fail at this simple task that I've given them if they do anything other than focus on me. And by forcing them to kind of split their attention or give me at least a portion of their attention, I automatically reduce the arousals, because it turns out dogs aren't particularly good multitaskers. Then from there, I'll certainly punish arousal directed towards a specific source. So like, let's say the dog becomes hyper aroused at cars passing by, and that's his little crack, so to speak, right? I'll wait until he sees the car. The second I see any sign of arousal, I'll significantly positively punish him in such a way that he immediately suppresses, and then I'll rinse and repeat that until he stops anticipating the arousal, because he learns that if he becomes aroused towards these specific things, the punishment comes, and the punishment, because it's actual punishment, will create a true suppression in the arousal of the dog. If you aim to punish a dog that is in a state of arousal, let's say you have a car chaser, right? So he sees a car, and immediately, the second he sees a car, you'll see the ears up, the tail up, the head, the whole body posture. The dog becomes hyper aroused towards the car. Right then and there, I'm going to apply a really, firm punishment, right then and there. And then the dog's going to start to associate the presence of the car instead of an arousal response. You're going to see that he sees the car, and then he's going to kind of look at you and be like, ooh, like that's not good. And initially, you might even see some avoidance where the dog's like, okay, I don't even want to be around cars. No, 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 that's not the answer. You can be around the car. The contingency for the punishment is actually your behavior. So if you show arousal, energy, or excitement towards the car, the punishment will come. But if you're able to kind of just be around the car and not do anything, then there is no punishment. In fact, there's the potential for a reward. And that's how you see the dogs begin to balance out, right? Just watched Interview Training Without Conflict, episode 3, uh, where Ivan says he doesn't agree with using e-collars for positive reinforcement. Is that what you're doing? I mean, I don't know if it would fall specifically within the category of positive reinforcement, but I certainly use it to generate arousal. And I would say he probably, I mean, that's a discussion that if I ever have it with him, I'd be happy to have it with him. But I would say, it's probably the different types of dogs that we train. We train very different types of dogs. And I think that maybe we look for different outcomes. And that's totally fine. Obviously, what he's done has served him very well. And he's had a fantastic career. But we all have our own vision for what we want and what we think is optimized performance, and that's my vision, and that's the way that I choose to train. And does it work? Well, heck yeah, it works. How would I approach a dog that seems to regress with the e-collar? Well, I would look at why the dog is regressing with the e-collar, right? Like, why is the dog regressing with an e-collar? Is it because he has a bad perception of the e-collar because the collar was only used when he was doing something wrong? Well, that would be something that we need to adjust, and we need to show the dog that the collar does not just exist for when he's doing something wrong. The collar exists as a true method of communication, and it's everywhere. It's not just when you're being bad. And when you put the collar only when a dog is bad, then of course you will see that, especially with more sensitive dogs, that kind of like suppressed behavior and the dog being nervous and fearful. But when you put the collar in more than just the bad places, you put it also in the good places, the dog normalizes the collar and starts to accept it the same way they accept your hands. I would say the same thing. Look, if you bring your hands towards your dog and your dog's like, oh, right? I'd be like, whoa, bro, like what you been doing to your dog, And contrary to popular belief, there's this belief out there that you must never hit the dog. I don't have that belief. Why? Dogs bite you. Like dogs bite each other. They don't have that belief. Remember how I said we don't live in falsehood, right? I live in nature with the dogs, right? I'm one with the dog. So, I have no problem making physical contact with a dog with my hand. Absolutely none. I'll say it to you right now. Oh my God, Has hits dogs. Sometimes. I pet them too. I feed them and I play with them. I do all those things. If you don't like it, go suck a lemon. That's all I got to say to you. The dog speaks for itself. The dogs don't lie. But going back to what I was saying, if you bring your hand towards your dog, right, and your dog's like, oh my God, I'd be like, oh, so you've just been using your hand primarily to correct your dog, and your dog perceives the hands coming in as being something terrible, right? But that doesn't mean that correcting your dog with your hands is bad. It's not. It's only doing that is bad. But if you pet the dog and you fed the dog and you played with the dog and you corrected him, then he wouldn't have that response to your hands, especially depending on the context. Dogs are very contextual. So if I approach my dog and I'm like, good job, buddy, good boy, and I pet him, he's all pushing in my hand and he wants contact. He wants the contact and he enjoys the contact and he's showing excitement, arousal, dopamine with the contact of my hands. But if I say, no, bad dog, and I come up to him with my hands, for sure he's going to be like, no, right? Because he knows the context is different. In this context, the hands are not good. In that context, the hands are good, right? If I say chip and I pull a toy out, he wants to engage with the toy, right? The hands are good, bad. They can mean help. Like I can help the dog with my hands, like if he's confused, right? You guys saw me training a puppy recently on the Instagram and Facebook. You see me using my hands a lot, right? To desensitize him to my hands, to teach him to go, like I'm touching him on different parts of the body to stimulate positioning, all of that stuff, right? And yes, I've also corrected him, the puppy, with my hands, right? But he doesn't have a general concern of my hands because he's already learned, even at the youngest age, that my hands are everything. They're everywhere and they're involved in everything. And the context is what determines what my hands mean. This is outrageous. Reporting now. Looks like we got a blue hair in the chat. Yeah, and I'm telling you guys what, listen, you take your favorite, let me just get rid of this person with the mental health issues here. You take your favorite YouTuber, dog influencer, whatever, right? All these guys. Like, I know them all. Well, I'm not going to lie. I don't know them all directly, but let's say I'm familiar with a lot of them, either directly, secondhand, or whatever. Every one of them, for the most part, has no problem giving a dog the gears when it's the time to give the dog the gears, right? Every one of them. Or what they're trying to show you on Instagram and Facebook and YouTube is trash. Like it's not actually there in real life. And you see their dog in competition, it falls apart. You see their dog in real life, and you're like, bro, how are you famous? You know, like this dog barely even listens to you. You've had this dog for 5 years. What's going on, right? So I'm my goal here is to be brutally honest with you guys about what is training and what is not training. So I'm not going to sit here and say, look, you can use an e-collar and a prong collar to correct your dog, but you must never use your hand to correct the dog, right? But you'll notice I also don't tell you to punish your dog with an e-collar, prong collar, or your hand, because any one of those things can be equally screwed up beyond belief, right? It's all about timing. It's all about your ability to contextualize things and say, hey, this is right, this is wrong. You know, and the dog understands the context. And when the dog understands the contingency for things happening, the dog is in control, right? That's the big thing. Have I ever seen someone break a finger in a leash or accidents? Sure, I've seen a lot of things. Get a lot of older ladies getting pulled over by their dogs, breaking hips, breaking wrists, so on and so forth. Thankfully, not here, but I've certainly seen clients get pretty messed up by their big pet dogs, right? Have I ever had a dog try to bite my hand when correcting? Yeah, of course. The no pill man says a correction is a correction is a correction, regardless of the means. Yes, people get caught up in the means, right? Hey guys, get the likes up. There's 94 of you in here. I got 43 likes. Get the likes up. I'm risking everything to tell you guys these things. I hate this world we live in where we can't just tell the truth. You know, I like sitting here and talking to you guys like I would talk to you in the real world. You know what I mean? Like it's this is the real world. I hate this like this world we live in where you can only like say certain things like, oh, you know, like, all right, like if you want to correct your dog, you have to do so humanely with the e-collar and the prong collar, but you must never like, you know, use your hand with your dogs. Like why? Why is that morally a better thing to do than that? It's like no one can actually explain that from a scientific standpoint. A punishment is a punishment is a punishment, right? There's a time to apply it and there's a time not to. A correction is a correction. Guidance is a guidance is a guidance, right? Reward is a reward is a reward. Who cares if you rewarded your dog with a ball, a piece of food, or you let him bite the leash? Who cares? Like he doesn't care. You know what I mean? We get so caught up in these things instead of just telling the truth. And what I love about working with dogs is they're just natural beings. They're natural beings, right? And they exist in a state of nature and they don't lie. They don't lie. And that's what's so cool about working with them. Daron says, I'd love to become a dog trainer, but I don't want to deal with people being uncomfortable with the truth. Yeah, I mean, look, the way I'm talking to you guys on this live is not how I'm going to talk to the clients that roll in with their golden retriever that, you know, pulls on the leash and doesn't come when he's called, and nor do I need to. Their goals are easy goals to accomplish. I don't need to, you know, hit the dog or any of that kind of nonsense. Like, I don't need to do any of that. We can use the tools. It's going to be easy. It's going to be low stress for them, low stress for the dog. You know, wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. Be on your way. Have a good day. Right? That's all you need to do with most of your clients. You know, I'm talking to you guys about like more advanced concepts, right? I'm not talking about like some basic pet training. And a lot of people think like, oh, you know, it's funny because like this I have this reputation because of the way I speak of being like very heavy-handed. And it's because you know, it's funny because a lot of people that train with me actually end up being quite surprised by like how not heavy-handed I am. but I can be very heavy-handed when it is warranted and when it's the best thing for the dog and the training outcome, right? Um, to be honest, I do lean into the heavy-handed kind of like persona because it's kind of funny to me, right? But and I'm, like I said, I'm a little bit of a troll at heart, so I like to kind of troll a little bit. But it's just because of the way I speak, whereas a lot of other dog trainers will sugarcoat the way they say things. But I don't sugarcoat anything. It's just not my way. But that being said, you know, just because we're talking about being heavy-handed doesn't mean that you have to be heavy-handed even with most dogs. Like the average pet dog I get in, I don't need to be heavy-handed at all with them. Like just nice, easy training, some food, use the tools, simple training, follow the elite off leash program. Boom, thank you, fully off leash trained. No heavy handedness required, right? But there are some dogs, you know, where there comes a time where you have to go to that place because it's the best thing for them and for the training outcome instead of, half assing it for the next 2 years. Man, what is with Facebook and all these insane people? Or not Facebook, I should say YouTube. Christina says, my Malinois is funny with emotions. He is very sensitive, but is easier to correct. But my German Shepherd is like, okay, I messed up. But what are you going to do about it? Yeah, that's the breeds in a nutshell, basically, right? Jindo Man says, intent makes the correction work. Yeah, absolutely, man. It's all about your intent. I'm going to tell you guys a funny thing. So, you guys remember, like, I did a reel not long ago where I think like I took a video of the kennel and there was like all these dogs barking in the kennel, right? Whoa, they're all barking, being idiots, right? And it's been like that for a long time because we always have like new dogs in the kennel, right? Like because it's always like new dogs coming into the kennel and the dogs always blow up when you walk another dog past, right? It's just they're bored in there, right? Like they like doing that. It's just something when you put dogs behind a barrier. Especially when they see another dog on the other side of the barrier, they like to bark and jump on the barrier, whatever. And it's been like that, and I've just kind of accepted it as being part of like running a dog kennel. But one day, I was like, man, you know what? Like, it's so freaking noisy. I can't hear myself think. It's really not nice. What's going on here, right? So I said, all right, that's it. We're not going to do this anymore. There will be no more barking in the kennel. That's the new rule, right? I don't care what new dog is here. There will be no barking in this kennel when I walk into the kennel. Okay? So you guys remember the reel, right? It's all barking. Then I walk in and it's silent, right? That change occurred in literally 1 minute. Took about 60 seconds. I identified the fire starters. There was about 3 dogs in the kennel, all working dogs, ironically, that were the biggest barkers. Like they were the ones that set all the dogs off. And if you know anything about dogs, especially when they're in groups, the pack mindset is very strong in them. It's a natural thing that they probably have retained from their days as wolves, right? So the pack mindset, the group mindset, whatever one member of the group is doing, they're all doing, right? Especially the more, let's say, strong members of the group, the more intense members of the group, they kind of delineate where the energy of the group goes and what they do, so on and so forth. So I identified the 3 fire starters. And I told them both, hey, knock it off, stop barking. One of them believed me, 2 of them didn't. I opened the kennel gate and I was like, hey, bro, I'm not kidding, stop. Then they believed me, okay? In case you understand, I'm paraphrasing, right? Then they believe me. They're like, all right, he's for realsies. Like he really means, when he says be quiet, he means be quiet, right? All the other dogs stopped barking. Every one of the other dogs stopped barking. There was like 20 freaking dogs in there. There were 3 problems. I identified the 3 problems. I stopped their problems. The others all stopped barking. From that day onwards, when I walk in that kennel, and there's always new dogs in that kennel, I'll come in, and they'll be barking because there's like a kennel tech in there, right? Walking or moving around. I come in, I'm like, hey, psh, every dog, silent. I haven't had to open a kennel gate in a long time to explain to the dog that I was really serious about being quiet. And there are constantly new dogs in there. Constantly. Like they're new. Like they don't know me, right? They weren't there for that initial experience. And yet, because the majority of the dogs always know me, because I come in there every day and they know the rule. Hey, when that guy comes in, we're quiet. There's no barking, right? Most of them do it. And it's funny, you'll see like the new ones sometimes they like won't know the rule and they'll be like, whoa, whoa. I'm like, hey. And then they'll be quiet. And then they'll kind of like, I think they like are like, well, like nobody else is barking. So probably I shouldn't either. Right. And like 99% of the time they stop barking too. It's a funny thing. And it's constantly new dogs. Like from the minute that I did that to now, I'd say probably like about 80% of the dogs in the kennel right now, 90%, are different than when that originally happened. And yet I haven't had to open another kennel gate in a long time. The transfer of that understanding that, hey, when this guy comes in, we are silent, that has continued on to this completely new group class, like this completely new group, right? And it's happened multiple times. All right. So speaking of intention, right? Again, it kind of gives you insight into how they think. How would I help solve off-leash problems for a client without having to describe e-collars to them? I don't know what you mean by that. We do use e-collars with clients, right? They don't need to truly understand the e-collar in a deep way, but they just need to understand how to operate it properly to maintain the training. Lenny says, Has is the man in this field. Everything he says, either I've found to be true later on in the past. I've seen it was true. Hands down the best trainer I've seen online. Well, thank you, sir. And I'll tell you that all the things that I tell you guys, I've lived. Like, it's not like I don't talk about stuff that I heard other people talk about. And if I do, I'll say that that's what it is. Like, all of this stuff I've actually experienced myself often many times. And that's why I now bring that to you. And that's why I say these things to you. I'm not one of these people that's like, oh, so and so god of dog training said it, so it must be true. It's like, no, I'd like to see it. Someone goes, you look so relaxed and happy. You must be Canadian. Well, I am. That's what my passport says. When I help people with tool bands on prong choke and e-collar, do you advise to still follow your same method on the flat collar? No, I do not. No, I don't. It doesn't work with flat collar martingale. Let's see what else we have. Anthony says, thanks for the content on the Belgian Malinois recently. I see a lot of Malinois in shelters because they are too much for the average person. Yes, they are, unfortunately. The concept of positive reinforcement is incredibly unbalanced. It's the same as it's the same level as you'll get these like really old school trainers and say, I don't believe in rewarding the dog. The dog just should do it because he has to. For me, they're the same level of idiot, right? Like a positive only reinforcement trainer or the guy that just believes that you have to beat a dog into doing everything. It's like they're both on that same level of stupid to me, right? It's like, that's not the way nature works. And it's not the way the world works. That's not the way anything freaking works, right? You want optimal outcomes, you must live in the real world. You want to, engage in something else for your own, and in all cases, whether it's the positive reinforcement only trainer or the I force dogs to do everything because they should do it just because I feel like they should do it person, they're both in the same camp of being egotistical narcissists in most cases that are looking to feel good about themselves through at the expense of the dog. There's nothing wrong about feeling good about yourself by doing the right thing for the dog. Like if you're doing the right thing for the dog and you're seeing an optimized performance, a good outcome with the dog, and you feel good, I mean, like we all experience that with our dogs, and there's nothing wrong with it. It's those people that do it at the expense of their dogs. I have no respect for them. Do I ever see myself trying Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu? My problem with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is that I like girls. I don't like dudes. And if you do, there's nothing wrong with it. But I think you know what I'm trying to say. So I don't know. I don't know if I'm ever gonna swing that way. But for now, boxing. Pretty sure it's like against my religion even to do Brazilian jiu-jitsu. Like I don't think I'm allowed to even be in contact with another man for more than like 1 second. Would I recommend using the e-collar to bring drive and intensity while teaching long bite for a dog trained through defense drive? Jesus, that's one hell of a mouthful, my friend. A, why are we talking about a long bite for a dog trained through defense drive? That's not going to work out very well. And no, I would not recommend using the e-collar to bring drive and intensity for a long bite. You got to be careful with that stuff. For the Six says, hey, I have a German Shepherd named Gunner who's just over 1 year old. He's very relaxed and slow with obedience, blows it off sometimes. How do I ramp up the engagement? Make sure that there's more motivation present for him, and make sure also that there's more obligation present. You get more good things, but you also have to do it, right? Make sure both of those are present. Good to have a wrestling background before jiu-jitsu. BJJ guys don't hold each other down. I've heard that actually from my MMA coach. You know, I don't know. Maybe I just need to move to the U.S. and carry a gun. That would save me a lot of wrestling, I think. It's one of those things, grappling is a necessity if you want to be good with your hands, so to speak. Um, you know, but the good news is all altercations generally start on the feet. So if you can keep it there. All right, guys. Looks like we've come to the end of this one. I'm sure I've offended some of you. And those of you that felt offended during this live, I don't want to deal with you in any capacity. You're probably an extremely unrealistic person who's sensitive and doesn't have good control over their emotions, and thus would not be good at training their dog, applying pressure to the dog, doing any of that kind of stuff. I find these people often tend to project their own lack of emotional control and regulation onto others that are able to kind of joke the way that we joke and troll the way that we troll, and they take it they take it too seriously, and they overreact to everything. These are the types of people I don't think they should be training dogs with pressure. I don't think probably they should be training dogs, period. They have some personal work to do. But for everybody else that enjoyed the live, found it useful, so on and so forth, hope you enjoy it. Again, I'm going to put the webinar link in this description of this YouTube video, and it's also available on Facebook. Y'all have a fantastic weekend.